How many times has someone wondered, in silence, why they work so hard and seem to never move forward? There comes a point where effort no longer explains the result. What prevents prosperity isn't the lack of opportunities, but an invisible limit that each mind carries. It's the kind of barrier that can't be seen, but commands one's entire life. Many believe that not earning enough is a matter of luck, market conditions, or destiny. However, the true cause lies in how consciousness organizes itself. The mind creates a ceiling, not made of concrete but of beliefs, that defines how much an individual believes they deserve. And the curious thing is that this ceiling wasn't built by personal choice, but inherited from ancient voices: parents, teachers, religion, culture. It's as if childhood left secret codes programming how much one can receive without guilt. When someone tries to break through this limit, the unconscious react. The body contracts, fear appears, and something inside says, "This is too much for me." There's no bad luck in this, there's vibration. Money is energy, and energy only flows where there's permission. As long as the person vibrates in scarcity, the universe responds with the same pattern, not as punishment but as coherence. The most surprising thing is that this limitation isn't permanent. The mind can be reprogrammed. And when this happens, something changes profoundly. Opportunities appear, flow is re-established, and life begins to respond to a new level of consciousness. The video that begins now is a journey through this invisible structure that controls how much someone allows themselves to prosper. It's not just about money, but about energy, worthiness, and expansion. By the end, those who listen carefully will realize that prosperity was never distant, just blocked by beliefs that no longer make sense to maintain. The human mind is a temple of accumulated experiences, and within this temple exist doors that many have never dared to open. Among these doors, one of the most silent and powerful is the one that defines how much someone believes they can prosper. It's what we call the unconscious financial ceiling, an invisible limit that isn't in the external world, but deeply engraved in the most subtle layers of the mind, in beliefs, in memories, and in the emotional reflexes that shape one's relationship with money. From an early age, the child observes. They learn not only from words, but from the tone of their parents' voices, from gestures of worry when facing bills, from the silences in discussions about money. When a father repeats, "Money doesn't grow on trees," when a mother sighs saying life is hard, the unconscious absorbs this as a law of existence. And as they grow, even if the person studies, works, and desires to prosper, they carry within themselves a silent code. I don't deserve more than this. The financial ceiling is precisely this code, a point of emotional saturation where the unconscious decides, "I won't go beyond this." It's not logical, nor rational. It manifests in the form of fear, guilt, or discomfort when trying to surpass the level of prosperity that the mind considers safe. It's the internal saboteur that makes someone lose opportunities, spend what they earn in excess, or distance themselves from good chances, just to return to the usual level. Itzhak Bentov used to say that the human being is a system in constant attempt at vibrational balance. When a person's energy field becomes accustomed to a specific frequency, for example, that of scarcity, any attempt at expansion provokes discomfort. The body vibrates in resistance, the heart accelerates, and the unconscious, with the intention to protect, leads the individual back to the old zone of familiarity. This is the invisible prison that many call destiny, but which, in reality, is just the mind maintaining an old energetic pattern. The financial ceiling is the result of accumulated experiences and internal voices inherited from generations that lived in fear of losing the little they had. It's like a transgenerational echo. Even without realizing it, someone can repeat scarcity behaviors that come from grandparents, great-grandparents, and an entire ancestral line that survived through struggle. Thus, prosperity ceases to be a natural flow and becomes a territory of guilt. But when the individual begins to observe their own reactions toward money, something begins to change. Consciousness expands. They realize that each thought about prosperity isn't just mental, it's vibrational. And if everything is energy, money is too. At this point, understanding the financial ceiling is no longer a matter of psychology, but of deep self-knowledge. However, understanding the ceiling is only the first step. There's an exercise that clearly exposes this invisible limit, showing how the unconscious reacts to abundance. It's a simple but powerful experience that reveals precisely how far the mind allows itself to dream, and that's exactly what the next point explores in depth. When someone begins to observe their own financial limitations, they may believe that everything comes down to effort, luck, or external opportunities. But the most revealing field is within. There's a simple exercise that clearly exposes the invisible ceiling each person carries, observing one's own emotional reaction to abundance. The mentor proposes that the individual open a real estate website, one that shows houses and apartments for sale. They should look for a place where they would like to live. At first, the gaze turns to what is possible, realistic, within budget. It's in this instant that the unconscious begins to show itself. When the person fixes their gaze on low values, on places that don't inspire greatness, there's an energy of limitation acting, a silent belief saying, "I don't deserve more than this." When shifting focus to look at more expensive properties, something interesting happens. The body reacts, the heart accelerates, a feeling of discomfort arises, and automatic thoughts appear. This is too much for me. People who have this kind of money must have done something wrong. I'll never be able to get something like this. These reactions aren't rational. They're emotional responses coming from unconscious programs that associate wealth with danger, judgment, or guilt. Itzhak Bentov used to say that the universe responds to vibration, not to words. And when a person observes a high-value house and feels fear or rejection, they're vibrating at exactly the opposite frequency to prosperity. The unconscious is saying, "I don't want this." And the universe, obedient to the vibrational field, responds, "As you wish." The exercise doesn't aim to create materialistic desire, but to reveal the energetic programming that prevents the natural flow of abundance. Money, just like health and love, responds to the state of consciousness. When someone feels genuine pleasure in observing something grand, without comparing themselves, without feeling guilty, the energy field expands. It's at this point that the mind begins to allow new possibilities, because the unconscious stops associating abundance with suffering. Some discover in this exercise how much the fear of judgment controls them. Others realize that the discomfort comes from the feeling of betraying their origins, as if prospering were a form of abandoning those left behind. These emotional layers are deep, but when brought into the light of consciousness, they begin to lose strength. The individual becomes capable of looking at abundance and feeling it as part of their nature. At this moment, the game changes, because when the gaze expands, the mind begins to reprogram its own definitions of possible. The one who once saw limits now begins to perceive opportunities. And this awakening doesn't happen by chance. It's the result of an interior process that redefines the foundations of personal reality. But for this change to be sustained, it's necessary to understand the mechanism behind all of this, the mental programming that creates and maintains the unconscious financial ceiling. That's where the real work begins, inside the mind, where the codes of success and failure are recorded from the earliest years of life. The human mind is a structure of overlapping layers, like a vibrational field that registers every lived experience. Everything someone has heard, witnessed, or felt transforms into subtle codes that shape the perception of the world. These codes are mental programming, and it's this programming that dictates not only what one believes is possible, but also what the emotional body is willing to allow. Two children, born on the same day, can grow up in completely different worlds, not because of the money their families possess, but because of the type of information they absorb from an early age. One of them may have heard repeatedly that effort is always rewarded, that the universe is generous, that money is a tool for expansion. The other, perhaps, heard that the world is unfair, that only the rich are lucky, that success is reserved for the few. These words, which seem simple, become deep programmings that define each one's limit. Itzhak Bentov affirmed that the brain is just the hardware, the software is consciousness, and when the software is contaminated by beliefs of scarcity, it sabotages the very functioning of the system. No matter how much someone studies or strives, if the internal program is configured for survival, any attempt to prosper will be seen as a threat. The unconscious, acting as a guardian, will do everything to keep the individual within the pattern it considers safe. This programming isn't just mental, it's vibrational. Each repeated thought generates an energy field, and the more it's fed, the denser it becomes. A person who grew up in an environment where money was a cause for fights carries, even unwillingly, a vibration of tension associated with prosperity. Thus, each time money arrives, the body contracts, energy closes off, and the natural flow of abundance is interrupted. But the mind isn't an eternal prison, it's an instrument of creation. What was programmed can be reprogrammed. When the individual begins to observe their thoughts with presence and neutrality, they become their own programmer. It's as if the system operator finally woke up and realized they always had access to the source code. At this moment, power begins to return to their own hands. The change, however, requires more than intellectual knowledge. It demands presence, persistence, and a new vibration. Reprogramming the mind is teaching the body to feel comfortable in abundance, it's making peace with success and allowing the pleasure of prosperity to be something natural, not threatening. And even though many understand this intellectually, few can sustain this new vibration. Because there's an ancient force that pulls them back, familiarity with discomfort. The mind creates safe zones even within scarcity. And it's at this point that the inner journey deepens, revealing the field where transformation really happens, the financial comfort zone. When someone lives for a long time in the same pattern, the body and mind adapt to it as if it were a constant temperature. And the curious thing is that this adaptation occurs even in states of difficulty. The person who has lived with scarcity for years comes to consider it a normal state of life, a type of disguised balance. This is called the financial comfort zone, an invisible territory where the individual feels safe, even while suffering. The human brain doesn't seek what's best, but what's familiar. It was shaped to protect the organism from threats, and everything that deviates from the known is interpreted as danger. That's why when someone tries to leave scarcity and reach prosperity, the unconscious reacts with resistance. It's not success that frightens, it's the new. This resistance manifests in subtle ways. Procrastination, fear of investing, impulsive decisions, or even the unconscious return to old spending patterns. Debt, in this context, is just a symptom of familiarity with chaos. Some say they live in debt due to lack of luck, but in truth they live this way because the brain associates the state of financial tension with normality. The feeling of having to chase after is addictive. When money comes in and everything seems balanced, the inner silence causes strangeness. Then, almost without noticing, the individual creates new situations to re-establish the old level of worry. It's the brain trying to maintain balance within imbalance. This behavior isn't a sign of weakness, but of automatism. Emotions also become habits, and the body learns to depend on the chemistry generated by scarcity, fear, anxiety, the impulse to solve something urgent. Freeing oneself from this zone requires emotional re-education. It's necessary to teach the nervous system to remain calm in the presence of abundance, to feel safe when things are going well, and not to associate success with guilt or loss. This is a gradual process, but inevitable for those seeking expansion. Changing the financial pattern isn't about earning more, but about energetically sustaining the new level. To prosper is to endure the silence that comes when fear dissolves, it's learning to live without the urgency of suffering. Those who manage to surpass this point realize that money begins to flow naturally, without so much effort. Because the universe never withheld anything, it was the mind itself that erected the barriers. When the internal field harmonizes, the flow returns to circulation. And it's in this state of vibrational balance that the next step emerges, the awakening of permission to prosper. Money is just one of the many forms through which life's energy manifests. It's neither good nor bad, but a direct reflection of the vibration the being emanates. When someone feels unworthy, guilty, or disconnected from their own creative force, the flow of this energy is interrupted. And it's exactly at this point that the need for permission to prosper arises. Many spend their lives believing that money is a privilege of the few. They carry within themselves the voices from childhood that said wealth corrupts, that the rich are selfish, or that the spiritual world doesn't combine with material prosperity. These beliefs transform into energetic codes and shape the way the universe responds to each person. After all, what one emotionally rejects cannot remain for very long. Allowing oneself to prosper is untying the knot between spirituality and abundance. It's understanding that money doesn't oppose consciousness, it merely amplifies whoever uses it. In balanced hands, it becomes an instrument of growth. In sick minds, it reflects the imbalance. Financial flow accompanies internal flow. When the being vibrates in harmony, money finds ways to arrive, because the energy of prosperity recognizes a receptive field. Criticizing those who possess, envying others' success, or judging those who live in abundance are subtle ways of repelling prosperity. Each judgment sends a message of rejection to the universe. I don't want this. The vibration of criticism is a frequency of separation. The individual places themselves outside the flow, as if unconsciously saying that wealth is something dirty, unattainable, or dangerous. True transformation begins when the person learns to admire abundance with serenity. When they can look at those who prosper and feel gratitude for the existence of this manifestation, something within them opens. It's as if they're telling the universe, I'm ready to vibrate at this frequency too. This shift in perspective is the first sign that the mind is beginning to align with the energy of prosperity. Permission to prosper doesn't come from outside, nor is it granted by anyone. It's an internal decision, a silent turning point where the being recognizes they have the right to live in fullness. And when this happens, money ceases to be a goal and becomes a consequence, a natural reflection of a mind that vibrates in coherence with the flow of life. In this state, the individual no longer seeks to accumulate but to expand. They understand that the more they prosper, the more they can contribute to the whole. And it's in this balance between receiving and sharing that energy continuously renews itself, creating a movement of effortless abundance. And thus, by understanding the unconscious ceiling, mental programmings, comfort zones, and the power of permission, consciousness approaches a new state of being, where prosperity isn't just a theory, but a living experience. Prosperity isn't a prize, it's a state of consciousness. Money, success, and opportunities are merely reflections of the energy each person sustains. And when someone awakens to this, they discover there's nothing to conquer out there, there's only something to release from within. The unconscious financial ceiling dissolves when a person decides to live with presence, courage, and worthiness. When they stop fighting against the flow and begin to vibrate in harmony with it. To prosper is to allow life's energy to pass freely, without fear of being judged, without guilt for receiving, without shame of shining. The question that remains is simple, but profound. How far have you allowed yourself to grow? How many times have you stepped back just because success seemed too big? How many opportunities have you let pass by believing it wasn't for you? The consciousness that understands this never returns to being the same. Because when one understands that money is just an expression of one's own vibration, a new responsibility emerges, to take care of the energy one emits. That's when the game changes, and life begins to respond in a different way. So, before leaving this video, reflect. What, within you, still needs permission to prosper? And if this content touched some part of your soul, subscribe to the channel, activate notifications, and continue expanding along this journey. There's much more to be explored, and each new step is an opportunity to elevate not only your consciousness, but all the reality around you.